Alright. So the thermostat in the space is calling for heat. But there is no heat. There's no water flow through the baseboard radiators in the space. And so even though this is calling for heat, set to 68, 70 degrees, actual temperature inside is what? 55 degrees. And to go to the boiler room, first you look at the controller and see if the light is on for that specific zone to confirm if it is calling for heat, and it is calling for heat. So you know that there's no problem between the thermostat and the controller. Then you hear the humming of the pump, which indicates that the pump is running or trying to run. And you look at the pump and you touch it, it's going to be very warm. When you touch this pipe, the pipe is not hot like the way it's supposed to be. Okay? That means there is no flow through here. The way it's supposed to work is this supposed to pump. The thermostat tells controller I need heat. Controller says pump come on. Pump starts to turn. The flow of the water is pumping through the boiler. So this is how water moves. So from the pump, water moves, comes here, goes here, comes here, goes inside the boiler, go through the heat exchanger inside the boiler, comes back out, goes to the specific zone flow valve, which is essentially a backflow preventer for the hydronic systems, so that the water flow is only in this direction and never in the back direction. And this is usually used when you have multiple zones. So the water is coming through, like I said, move through here, goes through here, goes all the way around, goes through the radiators. So entering it, water is 180 degrees. By the time it leaves, it's probably at 140, and it's coming back down. And then as long as this pump is moving, the water is doing the circulation through that particular loop. There are other zones that we're not going to discuss, but they do the same, and they do it independently. Okay. So test number one is to see if this motor works. So one of the ways to do that is to turn off the system, remove the motor from the housing, and see if the impeller moves freely. And also you can do the test, not recommended, but that's what I did, is turn the thermostat back on and see if the motor spins, and it spun just fine. So that was the test. That is this circulator bad? No, it was not bad. One thing that I would say is it's possible that this pump may be not as strong as it maybe used to be, but I have a suspicion that that's not really the case. Banking on that based on what my diagnostic was. So this pump is working. It is doing what it's supposed to do, but why is water not moving through? Because every other zone, if you touch these pipes beyond this backflow valve, it's called flocheck, Flocheck, made by Taco, flocheck valve. This side should be very hot, but in our case, not really. It's not hot compared to the other zones. Because the water is moving, it's not touchable. Because 180 degrees is really hot. 140 is your limit. After that, you can burn your hands. So the pipes, the copper pipes and metal pipes, are really, really hot. And others, whereas this is like warm to touch, and I can grab onto it for as long as I want. So water's not moving through. So there's there's three options. Could the system has a block jam somewhere in there, pipe freezing? My system has glycol in it. Temperature in the house has not dropped below freezing, so that's not a concern. It has glycol in it, quite a bit of concentration, probably 40 or 50% of the water is glycol. Propylene glycol or ethylene glycol, either way, there's no way that pipes are frozen. So if the pump's working, then there's something wrong with this valve. Obviously you want to check any shutoff valves that are not closed. Obviously this, because it's happened as it was operating and it's all of a sudden stopped operating, the valves are open. So what are we going to do to test this valve? What we're going to do is we're going to turn off all the other zones so they're not operating. They're going to make sure that the domestic water is not working. Zone number 1 and 2 are not working, and we're going to go to, or 1, 2, 3. Zone number 4 is also, so only zone that we're going to try to, we're going to even going to turn this one off. We're going to turn this zone off. We're going to shut this valve off. We're going to shut this valve off so that there's no air traveling back this way. We're going to keep this line open. All the other lines we're going to shut off. Like close the valves, okay? So that, and what we're going to do is we're going to drain the water from here. And as we drain the water from here, all the water that is in here is going to start to drain, okay? If this valve is good, this PRV makeup water valve is going to see that the pressure is dropping, and then the bladder that is sitting back here, the bladder tank, that is supposed to give you, I think, up to 20 psi of water pressure. So that's going to start to fill this back up, okay? And if this valve is working, then this water will never end. You'll see that the water will continue to move as this water is keep filling the system back up, okay? However, if this valve, as this valve is open and we're draining and all of a sudden the water stops running, that is an indication that this bloody valve is no longer working, and that's what needs to be replaced, not the motor. Sometimes you have both of these things bad. I get that, but we've already tested the motor, and the motor is fine. So this test is to check if this valve is bad, and that's the way to do it. So let's get to it. Alright, so as you can see, this is the system. The one zone that is not working is this particular one. So this is where the water is coming back from. That's where the circulator is. It's supposed to turn on, run it right into the piping down there, goes into the boiler right there, goes through the boiler, comes back out up there, comes in through there, and that's that zone that's supposed to take up to the baseboard radiators, okay? This is what is in the question, this flow check valve. And what's in question is this motor. So we've taken the motor apart, just that housing section, or just for the sake of conversation, these 4 bolts that are down here, remove that, take the motor out, try to spin it and see if it's locked. Sometimes it's airlocked, but anyway. Motor is fine, motor turns on just fine, moves freely in there, so it should not be in the problem. So we're draining this now, this zone now, and we're hoping that this backflow makeup water is going to make up for the water, and I'm hearing the water flowing through it. So what it's telling me is that that valve is okay. It's not bad because the water has not cut off yet, and I'm draining it, and this is moving, and you can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it in the phone, but it's moving. So now I think it is the motor. If it's either it's airlocked or we need to replace that motor, but it sounds to me that that would be the issue. If this water had stopped flowing, right, and then the pressure gauge in here, so right now it's at 15 psi. You can see that by looking at the gauge right there. That's 10, that's 20. If the water was not getting filled up, that would have gone down to, 0. Or eventually got down there, but it hasn't dropped below 15. So it goes to show that the water is being filled up, and it's been a couple of minutes, so there's no problem with that valve. I'm glad that I didn't touch that. I was almost gonna cut that open and try to replace it and add a whole lot of work for myself. And you can see, because it's attached to copper, there's no easy way to remove that valve. I would have to cut it here and then remove that whole thing, and I'm glad that I didn't do that. So I think we're just gonna have to replace the motor. If I can find it, it's probably 120, 130 bucks. And just do some rewiring again, and off we go. This is one of the new circulators. So this is an old one, so the new one will look like that, and it'll fit right in that location. Alright, so what happened was, as I was draining the water, these baseboard radiators, because there was hot water stored inside the boiler at 180 degrees. With me draining the system, it started taking, so the backfill started filling the boiler, and the water from the boiler got pushed out, and and then it is not confirmed that the flow check valve is working, because with the pump off and just water pressure through the bladder tank, it allowed the water to move through here, and these came on, and the pipes downstairs even got really hot. And so that means that the valve is not bad. Confirmed. Now I've turned off the thermostat, pump's on, it's humming. We'll wait a little bit until we really finalize if it's actually still putting out the heat. Right now I feel it, but it could be the water that had already come in here and just radiating. But we may have fixed the problem, because it may have just been airlocked.